Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this virtual opening event for New Nordic Cuisine, the newest exhibit at Vesterheim. My name is Molly Thompson, and I am the Annual Fund Gift Officer at Vesterheim, the National Norwegian American Museum and Folk Art School located in Decorah, Iowa. I'm joining today from my home, and I hope you're all safe and well, wherever it is that you're tuning in from. And thank you all for being a part of this special event during this very different Thanksgiving weekend. Before we get started, I'd like to take just a minute to go over some information about how you can use Zoom today. For this program, you will not appear on screen and your microphone will be muted. We welcome you to use the chat function to interact with each other and with the panelists. The chat function usually appears at the bottom of your screen, depending on what device you might be using today. And feel free to introduce yourself. Some of you already have, so that's really fun to see. Thank you for doing that. And share wherever you're watching from. And if you want your message to show up for everyone attending today, send your message to panelists and attendees. If you're having any technical difficulties with viewing the program today, you can send messages directly to the Vesterheim staff panelists by choosing the panelists option in the chat box. And we will do whatever we can to help you, of course, but we are recording today's event and you will receive a post-event email on Monday with a link to the full recording. Another function I want to tell you about that we're going to be using later on is the Q&A function, and that's also located near the bottom of your screen. And you're going to be using that to send questions to our guest speaker, Tova Brandt, who's the Executive Director at the Museum of Danish America in Elkhorn, Iowa, and also the curator of this exhibit. New Nordic Cuisine is a traveling exhibit on loan from the Museum of Danish America. And Tova will be giving us a virtual tour of the exhibit later on in the event, after which she will join us for a live Q&A session. So please share your questions for Tova in the Q&A. We would recommend changing your view option setting to side-by-side speaker view. And I do want to add, because of the format we're using today to present a couple of videos throughout the program, which are live streamed through Zoom, there might be some delay in your playback speed with the videos on your end. Don't be alarmed if this happens. You don't have to try to reconnect. Everything will be clear in the recording that we send. And I'll also mention that sometimes even us as presenters could experience some technical issues like slow internet or something like that, but we hope everything comes through clearly and that doesn't happen. Stay tuned until the end of the event today because you're going to hear some exciting updates about Vesterheim's upcoming folk art school offerings and how and when to register for those classes. And there's a lot of really exciting things that tie into this exhibit. And as attendees of this event, you're all going to be the first to hear all of those announcements. Next, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Zach Rowe-Hayveld, who is the exhibitions manager at Vesterheim.
Thanks, Molly. Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your holiday weekend to spend some time with us to explore this brand new exhibit at Vesterheim. We're incredibly excited about the opportunity to work with the Museum of Danish America to bring another really great traveling exhibition to Vesterheim. We would love to be hosting you in person at the museum, but we just can't safely do that right now. In fact, our local numbers are so high that the museum decided it would be in the public's best interest to close again. So we were even originally planning on broadcasting this entire event live in the gallery. But over the course of the last several weeks, the planning team decided to pre-record different segments to minimize the number of people in the gallery at once. We just want to keep all of our presenters safe and we want to keep all of you safe. So our format today has adapted to accommodate our attempts to keep everyone safe. Don't worry though, New Nordic Cuisine will be on display at the museum until September of 2021. So you'll have plenty of time to come to Vesterheim to see it. We wanted to bring this exhibit to Vesterheim to highlight some of the amazing contemporary culinary innovations that are happening in the Nordic regions. We know that food is incredibly important to all of us and that Nordic chefs, restaurants, food bloggers, and cookbook authors have been at the forefront of one of the most exciting food movements of the 21st century. You'll hear a lot more about New Nordic Cuisine from Tova Brandt, whom Molly introduced earlier. who is the executive director at the Museum of Danish America and the curator of this exhibition. You'll also hear from one of our beloved colleagues, Leah Lovelace, who's the folk art school director at Vesterheim, about some really exciting culinary and food-related folk art school programming that she and her team have cooked up. I don't know if that's the only pun that will be in this presentation, but I thought I'd throw the first one out there. First off, though, we all need something to drink. So we're thrilled to invite and to welcome Dylan Reed-Maxfield, owner of the Courtyard and Cellar here in Decorah. He's going to walk us through his take on a Nordic old-fashioned. So I hope you have all of your ingredients at hand and at the ready to make alongside Dylan. So without any further ado, we'll get that started.
Hi, my name is Dylan, and I want to start by just saying thank you to Vesterheim and thanks to each and every one of you for this opportunity to create and share a cocktail together. I think if these last 8 months of a pandemic have taught me anything, it's how much I value any opportunity to share something together with other people or to celebrate something together. So to be able to celebrate this exhibit opening with you tonight is a pleasure, and I thank you. When the folks at Vesterheim approached me about doing this demonstration, I had a couple of thoughts right away. First, I thought, great, that sounds awesome. Let's do it. And then pretty much immediately afterward, I thought, well, what kind of cocktail am I going to make for the opening of a Scandinavian cuisine exhibit at a Norwegian American museum? Because honestly, that's not my background. Cocktails and bartending are my background, but Nordic cuisine is not. And so I thought, what am I going to do? Am I going to grab a bottle of aquavit and try to make that taste good? Or am I going to look up a menu from a famous restaurant in Copenhagen and then see if there's an ingredient or flavor combination I can copy? What am I going to do? But thankfully, when I did a little bit of reading about New Nordic cuisine, I realized that there were a few words I kept seeing that I thought I could take as inspiration. These chefs kept talking about using ingredients that were pure and simple and fresh. And also they were placing a lot of emphasis on using things that they could get locally or in season, which are of course things that we celebrate here too. And so I began to think, what is an ingredient I could showcase that is pure and simple and that can be sourced locally? And I landed on maple syrup, which of course is just tree sap with a bunch of water boiled out of it. And I think that's kind of the essence of purity and simplicity, really. So I thought, what is a cocktail we can make with great appeal that lots of people will enjoy? And for that, I turned to the world of classic craft cocktails and the old fashioned, which is one that a lot of people are familiar with and know they enjoy. So the classic old fashioned is made with bourbon and sugar and bitters. And that's it. So that is itself a pure and simple drink. But for ours today, we are using the maple syrup as we discussed. And then for our whiskey, I settled on rye whiskey because rye is a grain that grows well in northern climates and is found very commonly in Scandinavian baking, of course. So we can pay tribute to Nordic cuisine in that way today by using some rye whiskey. And then finally, I mentioned bitters in the classic old fashioned. Most people have this on their bar, Angostura Bitters. Nothing wrong with Angostura Bitters, I love it. But it is actually not pure and simple. It's got a secret list of ingredients, natural flavors that we don't really know what they are, but they're good. So I decided to think, what could we use to add a pop of bitterness in this cocktail to bring the other flavors of the maple syrup and the whiskey to accentuate those flavors? And I thought of the espresso. This is why I asked you to get some espresso for this cocktail. We're going to use a negligible amount as far as caffeine is concerned, but it should provide this nice pop of bitterness. The nice thing about espresso, while it's not local to Scandinavia or to America, it is an important part of both modern cultures. So to build our cocktail, we're going to start with some ice in a rocks glass. I have some nice clear ice here, which is kind of just a fancy touch for cocktails. Regular ice from your freezer will work just fine. If you're interested in how clear ice is made and how you can make some yourself, one of the cocktail classes I'm going to be teaching virtually for Vesterheim, we're going to talk about that a little bit. So you've got your ice in your glass. You're going to take a half a teaspoon of your espresso right on top of your ice. Next thing we're going to add is your sweetener, the maple syrup, which we are using in place of the sugar in a classic old fashioned. The recipe I gave you says half an ounce of this, but we're going to add it more slowly than that because sweetness is going to be very much a matter of personal preference in this drink. So we're going to start by adding finally, we're going to add 2 ounces of our rye whiskey. With all your liquid ingredients added to your glass, you're going to give it a nice, gentle but thorough stir to combine all these ingredients. I mentioned how we were going to add the syrup a little bit at a time. At this point, we're going to stop and taste the drink. And if you find that your preference is for a slightly sweeter drink, you can add a little bit more syrup or you can stop right here. And I find that I would like just a little bit more maple syrup. So I'm going to add 1 more half teaspoon, and that will get me right to a half ounce. I'm going to stir it again. Finally, the garnish for the classic old fashioned is a fresh orange peel, and I've kept that for this drink because it pairs beautifully with everything else we've already put in here. So take your vegetable peeler, cut a nice wide piece of fresh orange peel. You're going to take this peel, hold it over your cocktail, and you're going to twist it up, give it a squeeze, and this is the fun part. You'll hold it against the inside rim of your glass and rotate the glass so that you swipe the whole rim with this orange peel. And you're now ready to enjoy your Scandi Old Fashioned. Skål! If you enjoyed this little tutorial today, check out some of the online virtual cocktail classes that I'm going to be offering through Vesterheim in the coming months. Thanks again.
All right, thank you so much, Dylan, for showing us how to make that Nordic-inspired cocktail, the Scandi Old Fashioned. It's just perfect as we enjoy the rest of this event and hear what's left to come. In the spirit of celebration, I'd like to offer a toast to good health and to everyone watching today. Skål. Next, we have a gallery talk about the New Nordic Cuisine exhibit by Tova Brandt, the Executive Director of the Museum of Danish America, and also the curator of this exhibit. Tova will be joining us live following the talk, so please enter any questions you have for Tova into the Q&A section of Zoom, and we'll get to those after the talk.
Hello, my name is Tova Brandt, and I am the Executive Director of the Museum of Danish America, which is located in the opposite corner of Iowa from Vesterheim. We're in Elkhorn, Iowa, in the southwest corner of the state. We are thrilled to share this exhibit, New Nordic Cuisine, with Vesterheim and the Vesterheim audience. And it's my pleasure today to give you a little preview, a walk through the gallery, and an introduction to some of the stories and themes that are really brought out with this exploration of New Nordic Cuisine. Now, that might be a familiar term to you, New Nordic Cuisine, or maybe not. It's a rather new term, really just developing in the 21st century, and it refers to a range of food ideas and values and a food movement that originated through the Nordic countries of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, and the autonomous regions of Greenland, the Faroe Islands, and Åland. So that broad swath of the Nordic region is where these ideas really developed and have influenced the world in the last 20 years. So today we'll take a little walk through and talk about some of those ideas. We have to start in the 20th century, though. There's always a story beforehand, and the story of the food in the Nordic region begins with a lot of the traditional foods that many of us may be familiar with. Things based on what could grow and thrive in those Nordic countries, things that were based on an agricultural lifestyle, on a self-sufficient lifestyle, and the traditions that made sure that the people of those regions could survive through a wide range of seasons and climates through the year. So the roots of Nordic cuisine are based in what can be grown and harvested and found in the environments of these Nordic lands. But in the 20th century, like so many nations around the world, the Nordic countries modernized, they urbanized, they industrialized, and that led to huge changes in society. More people moved to the cities, fewer people were living on farms, fewer people were spending the time to prepare food in the ways that their generations before had done. And a lot of that food culture was changing. There was a lot of consolidation of small independent food producers into national companies, even international companies. Grocery stores started emphasizing convenient food, grab-and-go food. A lot of people were now no longer working at home, but rather working in offices where lunch might be at the canteen or at a restaurant. So a lot of the food traditions that had been passed from generation to generation were no longer convenient, and they were no longer easy to maintain. And so a lot of the choices that foods were offering were getting away from some of the long-standing traditional recipes that we might associate with what is Norwegian food or Danish food or Swedish food. By the turn of the 21st century, a lot of people in the Nordic region were feeling like they wanted to kind of reframe the choices they were making in the foods they were eating. Values of environmental sustainability, of energy use, values of eating seasonally and eating locally, all of those became a larger part of the conversation about food choices and what foods we eat. And finally, in 2004, a group of Nordic chefs representing every part of the Nordic region came together and they signed what is called the New Nordic Food Manifesto. And this manifesto outlines 10 values which they wanted to define what Nordic cuisine should be. And it's not a set of recipes, and it's not a how-to manual. It really is a set of values. It's a set of values of being environmentally sustainable, eating with the seasons, really balancing good flavor with good nutrition, and finding a balance between what has been adapted and known to work in the Nordic region with new technologies and innovation that bring new ideas and allow for creativity. So that manifesto really focused the attention of both professional chefs as well as home cooks and larger food entities within the Nordic region to think about how the entire food system worked together, from the natural world to the production of ingredients to how food finally gets on our plates and the effects it has on our health and well-being. And putting all of these things together really galvanized a lot of groups and people from different parts of society to think about what Nordic cuisine would mean and how it can really reflect the best of Nordic cultures and values. So as we walk through the gallery, we'll take a look at some of the different ways that those values are interpreted and how some of those choices might be even applicable to us in our daily lives here. One of the key values of New Nordic cuisine is the idea of eating seasonally. And that can be one of the biggest challenges because if you think about the Nordic region, it is a place of vast extremes. Extremes in sunlight, from the midnight sun to days without light in the winter. Extremes in temperature and landscape, from rocks and glaciers to much more agriculturally friendly land. And also extremes in just the temperatures as the seasons go through. And so it really takes a thorough knowledge of the ecology and the climate and the natural resources available to be able to make the most of eating seasonally. In some seasons of the year, it's really fishing season. And whether that's Atlantic herring or salmon, for example, this salmon here, mostly life-size, that for thousands of years, people in the Nordic countries have depended on fishing for both fresh eating and to preserve fish throughout the year. Another aspect is foraging. And foraging is actually quite common in the Nordic region. There's laws that kind of guarantee public access for foraging even on private lands, as long as you do no damage and you take only what is ripe and don't take too much. You are welcome to go into the woods or the pastures on private lands and go berry picking or collect mushrooms or greens. And especially in early spring, this is a pretty common activity for families or professional foragers. In the Decorah area where Vesterheim is, we might be most familiar with the morel season in the spring, and that's probably the most well-known foraging activity in Northeast Iowa. But in Scandinavia, it's everything from chanterelle mushrooms to nettles as early spring greens, and other berries, blueberries, lingonberries, cloudberries, things like that. And then, of course, there's the harvest of the intentional agricultural work of cultivated fields and livestock. And so that's everything from, here we have some potatoes and carrots carved out of wood in the Scandinavian style by Harley Refsall. But so many of those varieties have been introduced to the Nordic countries at different points in history and then have adapted to the climate. And the people who have been cultivating these varieties, whether planted in the ground or raised in livestock, have really learned exactly what makes them thrive and where they best thrive for the region that they're in. So throughout, there's a lot of changing resources for food, food growing and harvesting and fishing. And the challenge has always been to enjoy what is fresh in the season that it is, but also preserve that freshness to last through the year. So right beside the harvesting and the foraging and the fishing is the preserving, the drying, the salting, the curing, the pickling, the canning, all of those techniques, many of which have their own long histories, but those are also well-respected parts of New Nordic cuisine. And new innovations and techniques have kind of reintroduced some of those techniques, like a renaissance in fermentation, and seeing how the chemistry of preserving things by fermenting them can add new flavors and new options for innovation in cooking. It's the restaurants in the Nordic region that have received the most publicity about New Nordic cuisine. A lot of them have become internationally famous. And Noma, which was a restaurant that opened in Copenhagen in 2003, has really become the informal flagship restaurant of New Nordic cuisine. Between 2010 and 2014, it was deemed the best restaurant in the world 4 times out of those 5 years. And one of the themes, as I said, there's no recipe guide or rule book for what New Nordic cuisine is. Instead, this set of values allows each chef and each restaurant to interpret which parts are important and how they're going to apply them to a menu. Eating seasonally is important to nearly every iteration of a New Nordic cuisine restaurant. But beyond that, the techniques used, the presentation, really leave a wide range of creative options open to the chefs. We have a few examples here. Here we have a dish, fresh cheese with fermented asparagus, violets, and gooseberry juice. Here we have lamb with onions and cabbage. Does it look like it? Not really. Some of these dishes in the restaurant culture have become so artistic that you almost hate to eat them or spoil them with your fork on the plate. But they are all supposed to be part of a multisensory experience to really see these ingredients in a new way, in a fresh way, and develop a deeper appreciation of what the Nordic region and its culinary resources has to offer. For most of us, whether we live in the United States or the Nordic region, we're not going to restaurants every day, and we don't have the benefit of high-end chefs giving us the most innovative expression of New Nordic cuisine. We have to make choices every day for ourselves. And so what are those choices that we make in our own homes with our families? Usually it's from a range of influences. What's available? What do we have time to prepare? What can we afford? What are our personal taste preferences? What are traditions that have been passed in through our families that we want to express through our food choices? As we look forward to the holiday season here, I'm sure a lot of families are thinking about the molasses cookie recipe from great grandma, or the cranberry sauce that has to be on the Thanksgiving table. All of these things are part of the choices that we personally make in our food every day, and those all express the values that we have. So in the day-to-day lives of people living within the Nordic region, there are a lot of people who seek out ways to pick their food according to values they have. There is a high interest in organic produce, a lot of food stalls and farmers markets that really provide access to local food, whether it's grown on a farm or produced from a local cheesemonger, bakery. There's really been a rise in bakeries again throughout the Nordic countries, as more people really appreciate the whole grain health and benefits of fresh made bread from heritage grains. So the food systems have begun to diversify again. That there's a lot more choices than what's in the major grocery stores. And so we see those trends throughout the Nordic region, just as we see them here in the United States, sometimes by different names, whether that's farm to table or local food movements or things like that. A lot of the ideas and values and themes are very similar. But ultimately, the food we eat is an expression of our values, whether that's a value of frugality or heritage or supporting local producers, or being a global citizen and incorporating cuisines from all over the world into what's on your table. These are all part of the options that we get to enjoy, and that New Nordic Cuisine is just part of that developing food story for the 21st century. New Nordic Cuisine has been particularly influential because it is an expression of values and not recipes. One wonderful example is a project in La Paz, Bolivia, where the original drafters of the Nordic Food Manifesto were invited to La Paz to help develop a program to give culinary training to underprivileged youth. That food training program began to support an associated restaurant called Restaurant Gusto. And Restaurant Gusto now serves the new Bolivian cuisine. Every single thing on their menu is raised or harvested in Bolivia. And the restaurant itself has supported anthropological expeditions to visit a lot of the indigenous communities from the rainforests to the highlands, learning more about what is part of their food cultures and what fruits and vegetables and animals can be incorporated into the new Bolivian cuisine. Another example of global influences is a chef named Sherman, who is of Dakota heritage. And he has really done a lot of work to reclaim the recipes and foodways of the Dakota peoples before they had contact with Europeans. So what were and still are the food resources available in the Great Plains and the Upper Midwest that can support a food culture that would have supported the Dakota peoples centuries ago? All of these share the same ideas of really embracing the benefits of a particular climate, a particular region, the things that thrive there, and the ways in which people can really celebrate a sense of place through the food that they eat. We have wonderful options available to us every time we step into the grocery store. And sometimes those choices can be overwhelming. But New Nordic Cuisine is really an interesting way to think about how to frame some of the choices that we make and be aware of some of the choices that we make. There's a lot of ways to explore this further. I certainly hope that many of you have an opportunity to visit the exhibition while it is here at Vesterheim Museum. The exhibition will continue to travel to different museums across the United States, so please keep an eye on your local museums and communities and see if New Nordic Cuisine might be coming to you. You can visit the website of the Museum of Danish America for a full itinerary. And you can also explore short food videos through the Nordic Cuisine channel on YouTube. Just do a search for Nordic Cuisine channel, and you'll see a lot of the types of food stories, both new and traditional, of home chefs, professional restaurateurs, food demonstrations, and some just different ways to explore all of these ways to encounter food and the choices that we make. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Tova, for sharing that gallery talk with us. And now Tova is joining us live for about 10 minutes of Q&A. And I see there's a few questions in the Q&A section already. We'll get Tova here on screen with us, and then we can go ahead and get started with those. So if you haven't shared a question yet and you'd like to, please go ahead and enter that into the Q&A section. And Tova, just let me know when you've got your camera on and when you're here with us.
I think if you can hear me and see me, we're good to go.
Yeah, I can see you. Great. Thanks so much. Okay, well, we've got a couple questions coming in. So the first one comes from someone named Ellen, and Ellen wants to know, is organic/regenerative agriculture as popular in the Nordic lands as it is here?
Yes, definitely yes. That is a huge concern. I think arguably on a per capita or per mile basis, whichever you want to measure. I think organic and regenerative agricultural ideas are probably a little more advanced and more prevalent in the Nordic countries than they are in the more broadly in the United States. There is in general a much higher degree of concern about sustainable energy and chemical use, pesticides and herbicides, and even throughout the entire European Union, they have a much lower threshold of allowable genetically modified organisms. A lot of the things that American agriculture grows is actually not allowed into the European zone because of some higher requirements of how things are raised and what the production values are.
Okay, interesting. All right, here's kind of a fun one. Since potatoes come from the Andes, is lefse part of the new Bolivian cuisine?
I think that would be a wonderful, wonderful cross-cultural influence. Why not?
Yeah, maybe this idea can spark something with that.
Sure. We actually, there is a recipe, here's another cross-cultural thing, lefse chips with lingonberry salsa.
Oh.
That's a good cross-cultural thing that you can find in our Skoll catalog. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, neat. Okay, that's fun. All right, here's one from Nancy. My vegetarian son will be traveling with me to Norway this summer. Since he won't be eating fish or reindeer, what would he be served as a typical entree?
As an entree, in Norway, there is such a rich history of certainly the dairy fields, the cheeses, the yogurts, as well as I would recommend traveling in the growing season with when the fruits and vegetables are ripe. The fruits especially do so well in the Nordic region because they rarely are exposed to extreme heat. So, the apples and berries, those really thrive in that region. And so there's a wonderful history that incorporates kind of those fruits especially. But if in Iceland, they've begun to build greenhouses that are heated by geothermal heat. And so you can actually now grow tomatoes in Iceland more naturally, which is not part of the typical climate. But broadly, farmers are being very creative and adaptive, both in what has long been possible on the landscape, as well as what is now possible that might not have been earlier.
Okay, so lots of options then for vegetarians, so nothing to be worried about. This comes from Eric, this next question. Why do you think that the values that underlie New Nordic cuisine are so strongly associated with the Nordic countries?
Partly it's timing and coordination. I think, as I mentioned, the Nordic countries are recognized as leaders in things like sustainable energy, and that idea of Nordic cooperation and Nordic identity. There is a very active Nordic Council of Ministers who regularly kind of meet to coordinate kind of multinational initiatives and efforts. And when the new Nordic Food Manifesto was signed and started to be promoted in 2004, the Nordic Council of Ministers really embraced it as a way to both further brand the Nordic region according to these food values that have, of course, much broader implications in society. It's not just about food, but the fact that it wasn't just a bunch of chefs who got together and said, this sounds like a good idea. It really became part of a more coordinated promotion and really a branding of the region to say, yes, we really think that this speaks to some of the progressive ideas of the Nordic governments, and the type of environmental values we want to promote, the type of sustainability values we want to promote. So it really pulled a lot of threads together at the right time.
Okay. And this next question is sort of related. So there are historically differences between Norwegian and Swedish and Danish cuisine. Do you find these differences in the new Nordic cuisine ideas?
I think the historic differences between the different kind of national cultures and national food cultures just add another layer in how different chefs, different home cooks, different restaurants can choose to interpret new Nordic cuisine through the lens of where they are. There are chefs that are within the new Nordic cuisine, family club that certainly aspire to show all of those values, but with a clear understanding of what the local traditions are. There's a restaurant, Aura, in Finland, whose chef really looks to be kind of hyper seasonal. The menu could change, every 2 or 3 weeks, and that's a major thing. But the dishes that he's making are more traditionally recognizably Finnish dishes. So whereas in Noma, everything was on the table in terms of how to present food, how to combine ingredients, and there's such a wide spectrum of how a Nordic cuisine can be expressed, that there's a lot of room to incorporate those distinct kind of regional differences from country to country.
Okay. Do you have any information about the New Nordic Children's Kitchen Manifesto?
Yes, that's actually part of the exhibit too. We didn't have time to focus in on it in the short gallery talk, but that's part of the exhibit too. And that was a kind of a spin-off of the Nordic Food Manifesto that really talked about every child having the right to have good tasting food, healthy food, both at home and at school, and how can those values of introducing children to understanding food ways, food systems, how to cook, that all of those were important for children's health and growing into healthy, independent adults. And so the Nordic Food Children's Manifesto is its own thing. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now you mentioned good tasting food there. Our next question kind of touches on that. They ask, traditional Nordic cuisine has tended to be a bit on the bland side, which I prefer. Is new Nordic cuisine spicier for international tastes?
Not necessarily, depends on the cook. There is certainly, and that's part of the range of choices, individual choices that can be made within new Nordic cuisine. So there's some chefs or restaurants or home cooks may choose to incorporate imported spices or even preparation techniques from other parts of the world, like have a curry based on local fresh ingredients, or stir fry, or other things, and certainly a lot of those global flavors have been in the Nordic region for a long time. There's Taco Tuesday in Sweden too, and falafel shops and pizza shops, and there's a lot of international influence already in the Nordic countries. And so being able to choose from that wonderful global array of flavors and cooking techniques, to be able to have what you prefer, what you like. I promise you can still find some pretty bland food if that's what you prefer, but that's all part of the individual choices that are open to everybody.
Sure. And then we just have time for a couple other quick questions that have come through. Ellen wants to know, are there any particular cookbooks that you might recommend? And then Hans is asking about kind of the cost of some of these, really well-known restaurants. Are there any that have embraced this new Nordic cuisine way of cooking that would be more affordable to the average person to go and visit and experience?
I think to the cookbook question first, I think there are a lot of really wonderful cookbook writers that that have made these ideas very accessible. Trina Hanneman is a Danish chef who's published a range of cookbooks. Everything that from one is almost a walking tour of Copenhagen with recipes to some of her, Scandinavian comfort food or Scandinavian baking. So Trina Hanneman is one. Klaus Meyer is one of the founders of the New Nordic Cuisine movement and one of the co-founders of NOMA. And yet he wrote a book in which he basically documented his family's recipes for a year, and really kind of looked at kind of what does a family really eat. So those are certainly in the Danish circles. Those are two big names. For the actual restaurant experience, restaurants in general in the Nordic countries are going to be very expensive. Even a pizza and a couple beers is going to run you, $75 to $100. It's just a really expensive place to eat out. So it really depends on your definition of affordable too. So, and again, that whole idea of, the spectrum of options, I think my advice might be, don't eat out for supper. Go out for breakfast or lunch, and you will find a lot of restaurants that are still committed to eating seasonally, preparing food with good flavor, good nutrition, emphasizing the ingredients available. But breakfast or lunch is going to be a lot more accessible financially, and because dinner for two at a full sit down multi-course restaurant, even ones that don't make the names in the guidebooks, is going to be several $100s. So
Okay.
It's a pretty major thing. There are also, if you plan to be traveling sometime soon, there are more and more food tours, walking tours, where you basically have a walking tour of a city. Copenhagen Food Tours is certainly there, and now they've branched out and have partnerships in basically almost all the Nordic capital cities, and that's a really wonderful way to both experience the markets and the food stalls, as well as some of the independent bakers and specialty shops and some of the restaurants. So that's also maybe a really wonderful, more accessible experience for the whole food culture too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for telling us about that. Thank you, Tova, so much. And before you go, could you tell us one more time, in addition to going to see the exhibit, of course, when Vesterheim reopens, could you tell everyone where they can go for more information, whether there's a website, or I know you mentioned the YouTube page as well, where there are some videos?
Yes, the YouTube page is a really fun resource, and we continue to add new videos every month. So Nordic Cuisine channel on YouTube, check it out. And we'll be working with Vesterheim to add some Vesterheim stories to that as well in the coming months. We also have a website within our own Museum of Danish America page at danishmuseum.org. And so that's where you can find the full itinerary for this exhibition. It will be traveling with COVID has shifted the schedule a bit. It will be going to Minneapolis and Portland, Oregon, and Chicago, Moorhead, Minnesota at the Hjemkomst Center. But the dates might have been changed from when you last saw them. So keep in touch, and we'll keep the information up to date.
That sounds good. We will. We'll look into that, and we look forward to being able to welcome everyone to Vesterheim too. So thank you so much, Tova, for joining us for this. Great to have you available to answer some of those questions. So thank you, and enjoy
You're
the
welcome.
weekend. All right.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Leah Lovelace. And Leah is Vesterheim's Director of Folk Art Education, and she's going to share some news from Vesterheim's Folk Art School.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to see all these wonderful names popping up in the chat and here on Zoom today. One of our great joys is being able to still connect with the Vesterheim audience, and the way that we can do that digitally is just amazing. We can still bring you amazing folk artists for instruction. We can still offer you amazing presentations. So anyway, I wanted to today share with you a few things that have just gone up on live today. You have the first choice of registering for these events. So if you want to go for the next slide, Molly. You saw Dylan. He did a wonderful job of introducing us to a lovely Scandinavian kind of craft cocktail today. And Dylan is the owner of the bar here in Decorah, Courtyard and Cellar. There's a very popular following that play trivia online every Thursday night. Check it out if you have the time and the gumption. But Dylan, I talked to him a few weeks ago about pivoting and trying something new and teaching cocktail classes for Vesterheim. He was really up for it and excited. We're super excited rolling out a few different cocktail classes. One's called Skål, Scandinavian craft cocktails. The other one's called Kusli cocktails, where you'll learn to make different hot toddies. Both of them come with an amazing kit to your house, which have some fun things for you to use while you take the class. But we filled the first two classes we released that are coming out in December already full. So we have more coming out between December and March in our first quarter. We're really excited to share those with you. We can go to the next slide. Another one of our cocktail classes that we think is going to be really popular is coffee and cocktails. So if you love coffee and you like cocktails, I think you're going to love this class. It is inspired by Impact Coffee. They are a local roaster here in Decorah, and they're also a very vibrant part of our downtown. And we wanted to uplift what they're doing with sort of the coffee culture, but also it ties in so nicely to the Scandinavian culture, right? Where coffee is very important. So Hannah Gary, who is one of the baristas / mixologists at Impact, is going to teach you some really unique cocktails using Impact Coffee. Again, you're going to get a cool kit to your house that has Impact Coffee and some other fun things for your bar, and you'll be able to join Hannah for an online event. All of our classes are just for small group of people, so that it's really about community building as well. So I think you'll find it really fun. And those are, again, in the next coming months, first quarter through end of March. So you can check that out after the show today. Very excited about this new offering. And I just, I think everyone's thinking about family traditions. And even if we can't be with our loved ones, we want to think about what are those important recipes that we want to integrate and carry on this year during the pandemic and kind of spread the holiday cheer. So we're excited to release these 3 classes. They are free because of the generous sponsorship of A&J Petersburg Agency, but we have some of our beloved families, Vesterheim friend families, sharing some of their amazing heritage recipes and some of their traditions related to being Scandinavian and related to family. So in December, there's a class on making pepperkaker ginger cookies with Christy Bissell, who is a chef from True North Kitchen. You'll hear about her in just a minute. And she and her family members are going to lead you through a 1-hour Zoom, and you'll get a chance to get an ingredients list and equipment you need ahead of time. Then you can Zoom in and join us as we have a fun conversation and watch her family make this beloved recipe. And then the very next day, on the 20th of December, we have the Kittleson family doing their famous potato lefse, which is quite famous here in Decorah and beyond. So they'll be sharing that. Then in January, we have the Minnick family, who are sharing their special recipe for kringla with everybody. So again, this will be a fun, free event. We hope that a lot of people sign up and you can join us on those special weekend days. This is Christy Bissell from True North Kitchen. In addition to doing the family heritage class, she's doing some amazing classes for us on making Danish rye bread and smørbrød. So you'll Zoom in and you'll make the Danish rye bread, and then a few hours later, you'll come back together and you'll learn to make some wonderful open-faced sandwiches. So we're very excited to have Christy join us in our lineup. You can sign up for this online. And this is a huge announcement. Maybe some of you know Nevada Berg. She's in the exhibition. She is the very well-known woman who has kind of made a blog that's an international sensation called North Wild Kitchen. She's an author of a beautiful cookbook. And she's going to join us for a very exclusive conversation on January 30th. This is actually a free event, and I think that it is going to be so well attended. We're so excited that Nevada wanted to graciously do this event with us. She'll be sharing her journey from the mountains of Utah to moving to a beautiful farm in Numedal, Norway, and then sort of her investigation of Nordic cuisine through her cookbook and her rise to being a sensation, an international sensation. So again, we hope you can join us for this event in late January. We're also working out some very cool exclusive cooking experiences with Nevada too. So that will come later. And I guess the last thing I would say is many of you I saw from the chat have already been taking advantage of our folk arts online classes. Well, we have a whole new slew of them rolling out. Today, we're going to give you a sneak peek at a couple that are related to food movement. So there's a spoon carving class that is live today in January. The first one in December sold out in a hot minute. We hope that you'll check it out. And then also Jess Hirsch, who also is teaching, in addition to an intro to spoon carving, she's teaching one on spatulas, spreaders, and spoons. And that's actually a weekly class that'll meet 4 consecutive nights in March. That's going live today too. Again, with our folk art classes, we find it's really important to make sure that everybody has most of what they need coming to their homes so that they can really have a wonderful experience. So our kits have been very popular. We've been really thoughtful about what would be helpful for people to have during the pandemic and not have to source on their own. And I think it's also a fun way to open up your mail and see your kit and see a Norwegian treat thanks to our store. So lots of new things coming out, but these are some related to Nordic cuisine. Next slide. Yeah, so just as I mentioned before, these are live for registration today, but then we're also going to be opening up a bunch more classes for registration on December 10th, and that includes all of our handcraft classes that we're putting online, more collection connection programs, other webinars, and our very popular book prot with Maren Johnson, which meets monthly, looking at different Scandinavian authors, sharing in a reading of a book. So, and more family adventure series too. So I hope you'll join us on December 10th to see what we're rolling out for January through March of 2021. And this will be the new normal at Vesterheim. Since these are unpredictable times, we'll be releasing programming 1 quarter at a time this year. We hope that we'll be able to welcome you back to campus too in the spring. But for right now, we'll have a whole bunch more online offerings coming to your home. Thanks so much. I hope you visit our website, folkartschool.vesterheim.org. And now, without further ado, I'd love to introduce my beloved colleague and wonderful development director, Diane Brondy.
Thanks, Leah. This event has been very different from our usual exhibition openings. Normally, we'd all be taking in the exhibit in person, mingling and celebrating. But we're grateful to be able to safely gather and celebrate in this very different way. All of us here at Vesterheim would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to the sponsors of New Nordic Cuisine, whose generous support made this exhibit possible. Our lead sponsors, John and Mary Hart, as well as Jim and Marge Iverson, Philip and Sarah Iverson, John and Birgitta Christensen, and Tom and Linda Brandt. Everything we do every single day happens because of generous friends like you who care about the museum. So thank you. I also want to remind everyone that even though the museum and museum store are closed to in-person visitors, there are many ways to stay connected with Vesterheim. We hope you'll be exploring our website and social media, where we offer videos, expanded virtual galleries, exhibits, online classes and program offerings, our blog featuring museum stories, and online shopping. Another great way to stay connected is through Vesterheim magazine, which is sent to museum members twice per year. The next issue will be arriving to members soon. And a very special thank you to the W.R. Sowie Trust for sponsoring this issue of Vesterheim magazine. Finally, I want to mention that Vesterheim's other temporary exhibit that is currently on view. This exhibit, Water, showcases contemporary art from Nordic Arts, an international organization of professional artists based in the San Francisco Bay Area. This exhibit opened at Vesterheim earlier this year and can be viewed on Vesterheim's website and in person once Vesterheim reopens to visitors. Water is sponsored through generous support from Decorah Bank and Trust, Marilyn and Julian Hansen, and Jeff and Marilyn Roverud. On behalf of everyone at Vesterheim, I would like to extend a sincere thank you to everyone watching today. We appreciate your ongoing support and friendship, especially during this unprecedented year. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Diane. And this concludes today's virtual opening event. Again, you will be receiving a post-event email on Monday with the full event recording. So thank you all so much for joining us today virtually and for making Vesterheim a part of your holiday weekend. And a special thank you to Tova and Dylan and my colleagues for sharing their talents today with us so that we could all enjoy New Nordic Cuisine together. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Goodbye.